Hello and welcome to another edition of Fide's podcast. My name is Jerry Serino and I'm your host, and I'm here with talent on loan from Rush. So, again, I am ever more focusing my show on the education or re education of students and certainly parents of college students who are continually bombarded with lies, with falsehoods, and with the left in general. So last night I was at the Turning Point USA chapter at the University of Akron up here in Ohio. And we talked economics and had a great conversation with a great group of people. And these are things I really enjoy, getting out and showing support for some very strong young men and women who representing Turning Point. And my guest today, as it would chances would have it, is Aubrey Laitsch, and she is a Turning Point USA PR manager, and she is here to join me to tell me a little bit about herself and what she is doing for the conservative movement. So, Aubrey, thanks for joining me.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited, and you absolutely killed it last night. We're very proud of all of our chapter members and all of the people who are involved as well. It's wonderful.
Yeah, great. Yeah, really great guys, great people, strong conservative. What I love seeing is how smart and knowledgeable these young people are. Certainly, much more so than I was at their age, and it's always impressive to see that and how they're having and what you know better than anyone is how tough a time they have on college campus and it's really frustrating. So let's start off with you a little bit, and as far as your background. So first, tell us what you're doing right now for Turning Point.
Yeah, most definitely. So I currently am the public relations manager for Turning Point USA. I started here about 2.5 years ago and will be here for this foreseeable future. I love my job. It's really great. I am over here just kind of booking news hits for all of our contributors on the daily, whether they're going on Newsmax, Fox, podcasts like yours, different radio shows as well. We work with hundreds of different outlets, booking all of our contributors as well as our ambassadors. We even just had one of our employees go on the other day who was unfortunately harassed at a Israel Hamas rally. So we were able to get him on the news. So really my team and myself are kind of that networking realm for Turning Point, where we are trying to get the word out beyond just our social media following and trying to get audiences of different programs to hear what's happening to the Turning Point students, ambassadors, contributors, all of the above.
Okay, yeah, excellent stuff and super important work. Turning Point is such a great organization. I really mean it. I had the chance to hear or see Charlie Kirk a couple years ago at an event here in Cleveland, Ohio, where he spoke to our pro life group up here in Cleveland, and but just love the group and everything. So curious as to how you got involved. I always love to know about people's journey. Maybe start from the beginning. Did you grow up in a conservative family? What was it like as you progressed and got to a point to be working for Turning Point?
Yeah, that's such an incredible question, and I really do thank you for asking. For me, I am originally from Gilbert, Arizona, and I went to school in Hawaii, and then I left Hawaii, and I actually moved to Colorado and Ohio, and so kind of lived all over, and then actually brought myself back to Arizona to start working for Turning Point USA. So I wouldn't have come back to Arizona, not that I don't love it, but Turning Point is what actually ultimately brought me back here. And so that's kind of right from the beginning of just kind of my life. And I really believe I started to obtain my conservative, more leaning values all the way back in high school. Oddly enough, what kind of sparked my
Mhm.
interest was the outrage towards police as a result of the Michael Brown killing in Ferguson, in Missouri in 2014. And this is because my dad at the time was a police officer and had been for about 36 years or so. And he retired shortly after that in 2016 after about 38 years of service. And I actually did my senior project on the police use of force continuum. And so, really, that's kind of where, when I think back about my conservative values, where it truly began, is it began with the people coming at the police and telling me that my family was this and that, all these really negative words when I looked up to my dad as a hero my entire life. And so the way that kind of ultimately tied into politics eventually was in my senior year in 2016. My history teacher actually had us sit down, and he told us it was just because he was lazy and didn't really want to teach us, but that he was going to have us watch all of the presidential debates. And he separated the class into three different sections: Republican, Democrat, and Independent. And he told us to sit where we felt like we identified the most. Mind you, at the time, we're just a bunch of like 17 and 18-year-olds. But of course,
Mhm.
I did. I went and I sat on the Republican side. And that was because, my parents were Republican. I always kind of thought, well, my parents are Republican, I'm Republican. So sat on the Republican side of the room, listened to all of the debates. And oddly enough, I actually really didn't love Trump at the time. I was actually a pageant girl at the time. I was holding the title for Miss Arizona United States. And I just kind of felt like it was weird. I was kept trying to imagine, the immaturity and the naivety in me. I thought to myself, wow, I wouldn't really like if my pageant director was the president of the United States. I don't really know if I like this guy. Oddly enough, I loved Marco Rubio. And I
Mhm.
still do to this day, frankly. So that's kind of a funny little thing. And then from there, I ultimately did decide, hey, I really do love the Republican standpoint and like this party. I really do feel like I identify most in this. It no longer became my parents' identity. It was mine truly from watching all of these debates. And so, whether my teacher was lazy or not as to why he showed us those presidential debates,
Yeah.
I really thank him. I really, really do, because without that, I don't really know if I would have known what it truly meant to be a conservative or a Republican. So I definitely am indebted to him for that. And then I moved out to Hawaii when I graduated when I graduated high school, and I proudly voted for President Donald Trump in the 2016 election in the state of Hawaii. So my vote didn't
Mhm.
probably count that much, but I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, well, a lot of interesting stuff. I think you mentioned the police, and so some of the talks that I do on college campus, I do it on the truth about abortion, the truth about global warming, the truth about the capitalism, and you could add the truth about the police. You could add the truth about just about everything, because you're right. The mantra that's put out there about police, that they're out there shooting unarmed innocent black men and all this stuff, and no one defends someone who does in fact do something bad. But it is not the case that the police are out there shooting unarmed black men. Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, uh, was was the aggressor and attacked a police officer, and all of the evidence around that was corroborated by black witnesses who confirms, just so people know. But it's amazing how falsehoods are put out there and people ultimately end up believing them. So just curious as to about when you separated in your classroom in high school, were you the minority? How were the groups set up?
It's when I was thinking about this earlier, uh, I'm pretty upset because I can't get myself to go that far back. It's almost, gosh, like 10 years now. So I really tried to remember. I almost want to say I feel like a lot of the kids did go to the Republican side.
Hmm.
I grew up in a pretty conservative area of Gilbert, Arizona. It's not very conservative anymore. It is a part of Maricopa County, which we all know how those guys went in 2020. But in 2016, 2015, around that time, it was definitely a little bit of a different kind of area, especially
Hmm.
kids my age. They were brought generally up more. They were brought up more in a conservative household. And we also have a very large LDS population here. So the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormon church, a lot of those people, are conservative. And
Yeah.
so I do want to say that I believe a lot of them were on the Republican side. There were definitely some Democrats, and surely now from social media and the people that I do still interact with on social media from high school, whether they were Republican then or not, they ain't now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's sort of like a transition, when they're a young age, they're more tend to lean more Democrat, and then hopefully as they experience life, they turn around. So obviously, the one other area I wanted to ask you about, or areas, was some of topics or issues that we're dealing with today that you're most passionate about? Obviously, maybe one is the police, since you have that connection with your dad and you saw firsthand what a bias towards the police can do, to a person, I'm sure. But besides that, what are a couple of the issues that are out there today that you are find yourself most passionate about?
Yeah. It's such a difficult question because I feel so passionate about so many of these different topics, especially, here at Turning Point USA. We are constantly talking about everything that we can while still being able to stay within our 501c3 nonprofit kind of compliance. On top of the police use of force is what I would call one of my most passionate topics. Very
Mhm.
strongly, Arizona born and raised girl, the southern border. The southern border
Mhm.
is just absolutely in shambles. It's been a huge fascination of mine for a very long time. And I actually had the honor to go and visit the southern border last summer throughout the day. And then it was very, very hot. So we went back in the middle of the night. That was a crazy story that we could do an entire episode on. But I did have the honor of going down there as well. So the southern border would definitely be a big one. For me. And then
Mhm.
something else would probably be kind of this war on sex that we're seeing with young people today. I didn't have sex education until I was in middle school. And even then, I didn't even understand half the things they were talking about. Nowadays, you're seeing
Mhm.
children as young as kindergarten, first grade, second grade, learning about these topics that even I, at almost 26 years old, don't feel well versed on. I just feel like they are sexualizing our children, and it's really it's borderline demonic in my opinion. And so that's probably my third and strongest topic. If I can add a fourth,
Mhm.
the right to protect your family and your land. We're looking right now at the issue in Israel. Which I'm very empathetic towards the entire situation happening. But those people don't have the right to defend themselves and even have their own guns at home to protect their family. And I'm not going to sit here and say that the situation would have been any different had they been able to protect themselves, but I'm not going to say that it wouldn't be different either. I do believe strongly that people should have the right to protect themselves, their property, and their family. And without that, you're looking at a situation like Israel. You're looking at a situation like Australia during COVID, things like that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point about Israel and the right to bear arms. I mean, you're right. I mean, when the initial thing happened with Israel and the kids were out and partying in, I guess, the desert, and that's where it happened, you might not think to carry a gun, and it's hard to imagine that things would have been different. But when Hamas started going to neighborhoods and going to homes, people could have armed and protected themselves from that if they were armed, and we need to expect to have the ability and the right to do the same thing. There's a reason, I always say, there's a reason it was put in our Bill of Rights as the Second Amendment. They didn't do that to ensure people could have guns to hunt, right? Because there was no Third Amendment for the right to bear fishing poles or things like that to eat or plowshares. The people needed the right to get their own food. That guns were not specifically in the Constitution so that people can hunt, right? That wasn't it. It was to protect themselves, and they knew that from history. So I want to go back to your point about the southern border. Yeah, being from Arizona, this stuff firsthand. Maybe just give a little. You said we could do a whole episode on your time at the border. Maybe just give a quick teaser as to what you experienced, and maybe expand upon for those that might be listening and that might be on the side of, we need to be compassionate towards people wanting to come here. We were all immigrants once.
Mhm. Yes, most definitely. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about that. We actually went down with one of my contributors, and I was a producer at the time. So I wasn't there to make any content myself. I was actually there to just assist someone else with making that content. And when we got there, it was just absolute mayhem. And it was, mind you, I think the end of June, early July, sometime in Arizona. So you're looking at about 115 degrees on average out there in the desert. That definitely feels a lot different. You got the sand and the dirt out there. There's something with the sun and it goes onto
Mhm.
the dirt and it makes it feel 10 times hotter. And so it was blazing hot outside, and we were watching these migrants come through the southern border during these broken parts. So, if I can give your viewers kind of an idea of what we're looking at, you've seen this Trump's wall, this
Mhm.
giant southern border, made of this really hardcore steel. You could not even fit anything between these bars in the southern border. But there were sections that were missing, almost kind of like building blocks that weren't quite completed yet. And then there were on top of each other on the ground, laying, about a half a mile away, probably, pieces of the southern border that had cobwebs on them because they'd been sitting there for so long. And while we were there, Border Patrol was super nice and very kind to us and very welcoming. Unlike many other reporters' experiences, I really do think that was God sent. I think we were meant to be there. God wanted us to tell this story that day. And Border Patrol told us, it's a little slower right now because it's so hot. It really wasn't, for the record. It was just slower for them. We saw about, in that time, during about 3 or 4 hours during the day there, probably at least 10 migrants coming through, all male, all just kind of middle-aged, anywhere from like 20 to probably about 50.
Mhm.
And we even saw a helicopter pursuit. And then they told us to come back that evening. So we went back to the hotel, kind of got some rest, got some dinner, and we came back at about 10:30 at night. And we stayed all throughout the night until about 4 o'clock in the morning. And during that time, I'm going to tell your viewers to brace themselves for this number. It was a Thursday night, random Thursday night in the middle of the blazing heat in Phoenix, or in Arizona. And we saw about 800 people come through this one sector of the border in about 5 hours or so, and they would
Mhm.
come in the masses. It was absolutely insane. It was no one from Mexico. It was a bunch of South American countries, as well as Ukraine, China, Russia. I'm trying to remember a few others. But, anyways, it was no one from Mexico. It was absolutely like you've never seen it before. We found vaccine cards, we found IDs, we found contraceptives, and other kind of sexual products like that, like condoms and such. It was a really, really disturbing sight, to say the
Mhm.
least. I went home and I remember telling my mom and dad that I've never felt a flood of emotions of frustration and sadness and confusion. But at the same time, I felt for these people that were trying to come across and want a better life, because there's so many who are doing that. But here's the thing is there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong
Mhm.
way to do it. And for all the people in this country who came here legally and took the years and years of time that it takes to obtain citizenship, I felt for those people because these people are just able to go and get on a bus and then go and get on a plane and go to anywhere in the country. And so to see it firsthand growing up here, I've heard about the southern border my entire life, but to see it with my own eyes was an image I'll never forget.
Yeah, it's really sad. That is a big number to just to see in one little section on one night in July to see that many people, and we have no idea anything about them, right? They may be wonderful people making a better life, but the fact is we don't know, and that's why we need to verify and have a legal process. Just like, by the way, Mexico has a legal immigration process that they enforce. And to your point about people coming from Ukraine and other places, it's over 100 countries that people are coming in from the southern border, and that's from not from me. That's from Mark Morgan, and Rodney Scott, who both been on my show, who talked about this from. They're both from former Border Patrol. So, all right, you did mention about, and we talked about Israel and obviously what's going on with in regards to the Second Amendment. So, I wanted to ask a little bit of your perspective on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in general. When I was at University of Akron last night, the Turning Point group had painted. There's a rock out in the quad or whatever it is, and they painted it the Israeli flag, and they support Israel, whatever. And the pro Hamas group repainted it, and for Hamas and all that stuff. What is your perspective of the conflict in general, not specifically what's going on now, although that's relevant, the conflict in general?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I love that you phrased it that way because I think what a lot of people believe who support, the more kind of Palestinian or Hamas side of this, what I think they lack in understanding of is the thousands of years of history leading up to what is happening today. A lot of these people, the argument I keep hearing is, well, in 1940 this happened, and this is Palestinian land. People are missing these a couple thousand years of history and of conflict in this region. So I love that you phrase, not necessarily what's happening right now. Let's talk about, overall, what is my viewpoint of this? And I did kind of grab something that I wanted to speak on specifically about this topic. And it
Hmm.
is that I'm a Christian. I'm sure there are viewers of yours that are Christian and those who are not. Either way, as a Christian, I believe that I should support the nation of Israel. And we must remember that Israel, the nation, is very special to God. And there are two important messages in the Bible where God promises to bless those who support Israel and to curse those who do not. And the first one is found in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. And why I think this is important is because, again, this goes all the way back to before Christ, when Christ was here, and very shortly leading after. And so overall, I feel terrible for the innocent lives lost on both sides of this conflict all throughout history.
Hmm.
But I think it's important what we note here is that the Palestinian people were given multiple options. I've counted at least six. I'm doing a lot of research on this topic right now. And I counted at least six different times that Israel has offered different kinds of peace offerings that included different parts of that land, of the nation of Israel and the surrounding area, all of which the Palestinians have turned down. And so I think it's really important that everybody understands that because people keep saying that this is stolen land from the Palestinians and given to the Jewish people. That is not the case
Hmm.
whatsoever. And the only people in all of this who have ever offered any kind of peace agreement where everyone can just live in some sort of harmony has been Israel. And every single time Palestine has turned that down. And ultimately, without even accepting the peace offering, the Jewish people removed their Jewish communities out of Gaza and brought
Hmm.
them back into Israel and told the Palestinians, this can be your land. They are in parts of the West Bank. I just got back from a trip to Israel about a year ago. And when we were there, you can see the Palestinian parts in the West Bank. I saw it with my own two eyes. I went to the Dome of the Rock and the Western Wall and had the honor and pleasure of seeing all of these things. And, it's just very clear that Hamas, not the Palestinian people, Hamas does not want peace in any of this. And quite frankly, a lot of the Palestinian people don't either. The Palestinian people did vote in Hamas. They did. I just saw
Hmm.
a study come out of, oh, a bunch of people have been citing it, but I've lost the name of it. But it was, I believe, 80% of the people, of Palestinian people, voted and supported Hamas in this election. And so, you know, it's a sad sight to see. It really is. But ultimately, I stand with the nation of Israel uh, thoroughly and 110%. And I pray for all of those who are suffering over there.
Yeah, very well put. I agree completely. People don't understand that there have been many, many opportunities where Israel gave everything essentially that the Palestinians were asking for, and then they still rejected. People need to know that history. We don't have time to go through the in depth, but people should do their history. And even if you do have a grievance about land, I don't think how Hamas has just handled it is the way to go about it, right? Even if you think you have a strong case in that situation, that's not what you do. You don't go behead babies and go start shooting innocent human beings. So yeah, really good points. And I think people, if you find yourself sympathizing with Hamas or the Palestinian people, do your research first, right? Do your research before you take a stand on something, because you might end up looking foolish. And think about the fact that every other thing that the left has told you about everything, is not true. So, why would this be any different, right? Okay, so the last area, and then this has been really great. Time has flown by. The last area is curious as to who are the people in the conservative movement that have inspired you the most?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I swear I'm not trying to get a raise here or anything like that, but I would definitely have to say Charlie Kirk
Yep.
is who I look up to the most in the movement. I first discovered Turning Point USA back in college when I was at the University of Hawaii. One of my great friends actually invited me to come listen to a conservative speaker on campus. And I'm like, who is this? I've been all alone in my conservatism. I'm really excited to go and listen to someone talk about my values. And sure enough, it was Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk on my campus. Oh, I'm sorry. I actually don't. I'm so in my head about Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk traveling. I believe it was just Charlie. But
Just
either
Charlie.
way,
Yeah.
I went. Yeah, I went and I listened to Charlie on campus, and so it was the very first time I ever heard of Turning Point USA. And ever since then, I kind of was following the movement and decided about 5 years later, after following Turning Point on social media since about 2017, in 2021, I decided to go to Young Women's Leadership Summit, which is an annual event that we have every June in Dallas, Texas, or Grapevine, Texas. And just kind of went on an absolute whim and didn't know anybody and got paired with some really great roommates and had a absolutely life-changing experience. I was actually one of the last very conservative values, side note, one of my last conservative values that I didn't hold is I wasn't very, to be super transparent, very pro-life. At the time, I was a little bit more pro-choice. And I remember at that conference at Young Women's Leadership Summit, one of the really big topics was the topic of abortion. And it really enlightened me to become a huge pro-life advocate. And so it was just life changing for me for that reason, amongst many others. And I told myself right then and there, I was living in Colorado at the time. I told myself, I want to work for Turning Point. I will pick up trash. I will do anything. And about 2 months later, I applied to pretty much every job on the website. And I just got the lucky one being a producer. My role has changed since then. Like we talked about, now I am doing PR here, but that's how I got started at Turning Point. And so really, that's why Charlie has been an inspiration for me is, to say that he changed my life and that Turning Point USA has changed my life is just scratching the surface of the things that I can say about this place. I've created a
Yeah.
family. I found myself at home. So I really, really do look up to him. His wife is amazing, Erica Kirk. Absolutely love her. Charlie is the kind of guy who doesn't just talk the talk. He truly walks the walk. And I really admire that. And I find that most of my values and what I hold to be true is very much so aligns with what he
Yeah.
says. But I promise it's not for a raise.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it would be if you asked 100 other conservative people about your age or even older, that he would be in that grouping. He would be in my grouping of if you he w- I, don't- I it's not an offense to him. He's phenomenal. He wouldn't be my number one, but he would be in the group of people that are influential in the movement and has done so much. And yeah, you're not picking up trash, so you're doing more than that, which is fantastic, and you're contributing greatly to our cause. And really appreciate what you're doing, and I thank you for coming on my show. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was such an honor, and I'm so excited to tune in and continue to tune in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And thank all of you for listening to this episode of Fide's podcast. Please check out all my podcasts and all the different podcast apps on YouTube, on Rumble, on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on rightamericamedia.com and on WHK Radio slash podcasts. Check that out as well. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you all next time.